One of my niggas slick said I've been acting funny since I got money. So throw up on the bags, let them have the shit that I fronted. I can bring my pistol in my soul, you know it got cancer. Thank you, man, on the same track I ran. Thank you, man, bro, on the same page. It's a new chapter.
Goat zodiac sign to date.
Sagittarius.
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 I don't even know the sign.
I don't know the sign.
I don't want to mess up the sign. What the hell is the beginning of, like March?
What's the beginning of March?
Pisces.
March
Pisces.
what, though? I don't know. I know Sagittarius coming. Sagittarius.
Yeah, Pisces.
Yeah.
Offset publicly banned Rio Rodriguez from Atlanta in front of millions of people, and Rio pulled up to Atlanta anyway. That sequence of events, one declaration, one response that wasn't even a word, is what turned a single lyric on an album into the most talked about beef in hip-hop right now. But to understand why this hit the way it did, you have to understand something about Atlanta first. Atlanta is not just a city where rappers happen to be from. It is the cultural center of American hip-hop for the last 2 decades. The sound, the fashion, the business infrastructure, the slang, all of it flows outward from Atlanta. And inside that city, your relationships are your standing. Who you are signed to, who you move with, who you call family. That communicates your loyalty without you ever having to say a word. Local connections in Atlanta are not casual. They are ecosystems built over years involving producers, executives, neighborhood relationships, and personal bonds that predate any record deal. To be embraced by Atlanta is access money cannot buy. To be publicly rejected by a veteran with deep roots there carries consequences that extend far beyond any single beef. Which is exactly why Offset's statement hit so hard, and why Rio showing up anyway hit just as hard. Now let's talk about who these two people actually are. Offset, born Kiari Cephas in Lawrenceville, Georgia, built his name as part of Migos, one of the most influential rap groups in modern history. The triplet flow Migos popularized reshaped mainstream hip-hop for nearly a decade. Versace, Bad and Bougé, Motorsport, those records didn't just chart, they redefined what Atlanta rap could look like commercially. When Takeoff was tragically shot and killed in November 2022, Migos as a functioning unit effectively ended. Offset was forced into a solo chapter that demanded he reestablish his identity without his brothers beside him. He has been navigating that process in a landscape that has shifted dramatically since Migos first took over. And his influence in Atlanta, his history there, his relationships there, remain enormous despite the transition. Rio Rodriguez, born Marquil Rowe in Mobile, Alabama, built his reputation through raw, emotionally grounded storytelling that resonated immediately with listeners from similar environments. He wasn't chasing trends, he was writing his life. His early projects circulated through streaming platforms and street networks simultaneously, building a fiercely loyal fan base long before mainstream media paid attention. The connection that changed everything for his career was Lil Baby. One of the biggest names in all of hip-hop, Baby recognized something in Rio that aligned with 4PF's identity. Authenticity, hunger, a voice that couldn't be duplicated. Rio signed to Glass Window Entertainment, and 4PF becoming one of Baby's most visible and trusted artists. Their collaborations are documented across years of creative work, and within the 4PF structure, Rio occupies a position of genuine closeness that sets him apart from a peripheral signing. That last part is what makes this situation more than two rappers arguing. The relationship between Offset and Lil Baby has cooled significantly over time. In the post-Migos era, as Offset worked to re-establish himself, Baby was doing the opposite of struggling. He became one of the most streamed artists on the planet, built 4PF into one of the most powerful camps in hip-hop, and essentially became the new face of Atlanta rap for an entire generation. That kind of rise in a city as competitive and relationship-driven as Atlanta inevitably creates friction with the veterans who came before. Shifting alliances among shared associates, producers quietly navigating loyalties, subtle public interactions that fans analyzed exhaustively. All of it contributed to a growing sense that these two camps were no longer on the same page. And in Atlanta, where your relationships define your standing as much as your music does, that cooling carries real consequences. So when Rio Rodriguez stepped into that context, he wasn't just another artist. He was one of Lil Baby's closest collaborators, someone whose entire professional identity is intertwined with Baby's world. That meant anything Rio did in relation to Offset would not land as a solo move. It would land as a camp statement, whether that was the intention or not. The fuse was already there. What happened in July 2026 just lit it. Rio dropped his album Scat. The project arrived with significant buildup, generated strong streaming numbers, and immediately sparked debate. But within hours of the album dropping, one line was the only thing anyone was talking about. The lyric, "Free bands, I'm locked in with Casino, but I'm not Offset." On the surface, it reads like a technical flex. Free Bands is Future's label. Casino is a respected Atlanta rapper with deep ties to Future's world. And the construction appears designed to establish Rio's connections while carving out his own identity. But context in hip-hop is everything. When you drop Offset's name in that construction, against the backdrop of already existing tension between Offset and Baby's camp, people do not assume a harmless interpretation. Clips spread across TikTok within hours. X was debating it from every angle simultaneously. YouTube channels dedicated entire videos to unpacking whether it was a real diss or clever wordplay. The velocity at which that single line moved through the internet was remarkable, and it forced the situation into territory that neither artist may have initially anticipated. Offset did not stay quiet. Through his Instagram stories, he responded directly and personally. He came at Rio with pointed criticism that touched on his contract situation, his origins, and his perceived motivations for putting Offset's name in that lyric. The tone made clear he did not view this as harmless wordplay. He viewed it as disrespect that required a public correction. And then came the statement that turned this into a full cultural moment. Offset declared Atlanta a no-fly zone for Rylo Rodriguez. For people outside hip-hop's internal culture, that might read as dramatic internet language. For anyone who understands how Atlanta operates, those words carried a completely different weight. Telling someone they are not welcome in a city is not a throwaway comment. It is a public declaration of standing, a drawing of lines in front of millions of people. Then, private Instagram messages between Offset and Rio began circulating across social media. Screenshots of the alleged DM conversations spread rapidly, with fans on every platform working to authenticate and interpret what they were seeing. The messages reportedly showed a more personal dimension to the conflict, language that transformed what might have been dismissed as posturing into something that felt genuinely heated between two people with real frustration with each other. Whether every screenshot was entirely authentic mattered less in the moment than the fact that millions of people were consuming them and forming opinions. The leaked DMs added fuel to a fire that was already moving fast, and then came the move that elevated everything. Reports circulated, through social media posts, location tags, videos, and the organic online detective work that hip-hop Twitter specializes in, that Rylo Rodriguez had traveled to Atlanta after Offset's public warning. Offset had declared a no-fly zone in front of the entire internet, and Rio, if the reports were accurate, had responded not with words, but with presence. He simply showed up. The symbolism of that act was impossible to overstate in the context of hip-hop culture. Appearing in Atlanta was not just a geographic decision. It was Rio answering Offset's warning with a refusal to be warned, without a single additional word exchanged publicly. Fans who backed Rio immediately celebrated it as courage. Offset supporters interpreted it as recklessness, bordering on outright provocation. The debate consumed timelines for days. Fan reactions split almost perfectly along camp lines, and the energy on both sides was intense. Offset supporters argued that Rio's lyric was unnecessary disrespect towards someone who had earned his standing through years of genuine contribution to the culture. From their perspective, you do not take shots at Atlanta veterans without consequence, and framing Offset's name as a distinction inside a boast was exactly the kind of subtle disrespect that deserved a response. Rio supporters countered that the line was clearly wordplay, that Offset had read into it far more than was intended, and that the intensity of the reaction said more about underlying tension between the camps than about anything Rio actually said. If you are secure in who you are, a lyric that mentions your name in passing does not require a declaration of war against an entire city. What made the debate expand so quickly was how many people it activated who had no prior opinion about Rio or any specific grievance with Offset. The beef became a referendum on which camp held more cultural authority in Atlanta right now, and that question ran far deeper than any single lyric. Because that is ultimately what this situation exposed. The post-Migos landscape reshuffled Atlanta's power dynamics in ways that are still being negotiated. Lil Baby's gravitational pull within that landscape has created a new center of gravity that inevitably puts him and his closest artists in contact with the legacy figures who preceded them. And the peace between certain camps, it turns out, was being maintained by distance. The moment that distance collapsed, through one lyric on one album, everything that had been held back came forward at once. Rio's line collapsed the distance. Offset's response confirmed how much work that distance had been doing. And Rio, pulling up to Atlanta, made clear that whatever comes next, this chapter is not finished. One lyric, one response, one reported appearance in a city, and underneath all of it, years of shifting alliances, unspoken rivalries, and the enormous pressure of maintaining relevance and respect inside a city that does not forgive weakness and never forgets disrespect. That is what everybody is actually watching. What do you think happens next? Does this stay online, or does it go further? Drop your take in the comments. Subscribe for the full breakdown as this situation develops.